Hey now Brawlers, today we're going to take a look at Atlantis Rising from Z-Man Games. Now this is an interesting game in the sense that it is a cooperative game with some Eurogame elements, and you really don't hear that very often, even now in the age of the cooperative games. And the theme of this game is that Atlantis was actually a real place, and it was not only that, it was a technological marvel. They had all this cool, semi-magical, techno-magical Final Fantasy type equipment, and the whole island is beset by both natural disasters and Athenians trying to destroy the island and plunder its riches. So the scientists on Atlantis decided that they are going to construct a machine that's going to teleport what's left of the island away and all of its remaining citizens to safety. Each of the players in this game represents either like a warrior or a scholar or a mystic or the like, who are trying to help gather the resources necessary to build this machine, actually build take the schematics and build these individual parts so that the scientists can put them all together and then whisk the island away to safety. But of course, it's not going to be quite that easy. You have all these different... The island is flooding while the Athenians are attacking, and you have to make use of your special powers and try to save the island as quickly as you can. So let's go ahead and do a brief overview of the game, then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, just a brief overview of Atlantis Rising. This is a cooperative game for 2 to 6 players, and the theme of the game is that the ancient mythological city of Atlantis was actually like a technological marvel, but now it is being beset by natural disasters and the evil Athenians attacking and trying to plunder its riches. So the scientists of Atlantis have devised a technological machine that is going to teleport what's left of the island and its inhabitants away to another dimension and to safety. So you, as the heroes of the game, are trying to get all the different resources and build the different parts of the machine necessary in order to get all of the people to safety. I'm sorry, it's this deck of cards, this is the schematics. So if you can do that, if you can build all 10 parts of the machine, you win the game. However, if every single tile on the island floods, represented by flipping them over like this, and eventually the last one that will flood will be the center, if that happens, you lose the game. So at the beginning of the game, each player is going to take one of these different hero cards representing the person that you're taking control of and all the taking command of the meeples in Atlantis, and we'll get back to those in a minute because I want to explain the rest of the game first before I talk about their special abilities. You'll take a champion, you'll take 3 different colored meeples, and there's 6 meeples total. You'll have an opportunity to get more later because this is a worker placement game, so you may be able to take actions which will get you more workers. Here is the different ore you can gather in the game to build the parts of the machine. You have gold, crystals, ore, and the ore can eventually be refined into Atlantium, which is the rarest of the resources. You have dice, which are used to gather resources. This black die, together with this board and this black meeple ship here, represent the Athenians, and we'll get back to that in a minute. That's one of the bad things that can happen to you in this game. And speaking of that, you have this deck, which is the Flood deck. Now this is, if you ever played a game like Pandemic, this is basically the game and doing something bad to you and giving you a challenge. This is going to represent the different tiles flooding. And then at the beginning, you're going to have to choose 10 of these different schematic cards, which represent the pieces of the machine that are going to save Atlantis. Now, the game recommends that you start with the cards that are marked A on the back, because those are sort of simpler, and you also always start with this Power Core card. But there is also B cards and C cards, and basically you can, and D cards, and you can basically randomize them and do whatever 10 that you want in order to give yourself a varied experience and perhaps more challenging experience. But whatever 10 you choose, you'll have them, and you're actually going to lay them out on the board for everyone to see. I'll just lay a few out there so you get the idea. And there you go, that's the machine that you want to build. Now, there's also these knowledge cards, which are special ability cards, which you may have access to later. You have courage tokens, which you can put together with your workers, and you have mystic energy, and this is just the quite lame first player marker. But in any case, what's going to happen, players in turn order are going to take turns taking whatever workers, the meeples that they have, and putting them on these different spots on the board. It's kind of hard to see, but there's these little circular indentations on every single segment of the board. And whatever, depending on where you place them, you may be able to take a different action. But before you do that, everyone's going to lay out as many workers as they have, and then you're going to go to the flooding stage. Now, the flooding stage is where you actually, each player has to draw a card from the flood deck and do whatever it says. So, for instance, this one says flood mountains. If it's flood mountains, you go to the mountainous region, and then you have to flood whatever the lowest unflooded piece is at the bottom. You flip it over like that. Next player goes, flood forges. Then you have to flood the forge. Now some of these will give you different options. So controlled flood, flood 2 tiles in any sections. Then you as the players have to come to an agreement of what 2 tiles to flood, following the same rules going from outward to in, but you can choose whatever 2 segments you want. Earthquake, all target numbers in the mountains, hills, and forests are increased by 1 this turn, and we'll talk about that in a second. So everyone has to take this negative action. That's just kind of what you have to do. Now the bad part about this is where if a tile floods and you actually have meeples on it, then those meeples, they're not dead, but they go back to your supply, and you're not able to take the resource action of any of the segments where these meeples have been lost to floods. The reason why, now you might say to yourself, well, why not just never put the meeples down near the edge where they might flood? The reason for that is because the actions get easier to take and more productive if you're near the edges of or near the ends of each of these legs of the board. So for instance, let's talk about this. This area here, I believe is called the libraries, where this is where you can get the action cards. The action cards can be very helpful. Lost Schema, pay 1 less of any resource when building a component. Ballad of Bravery, each player who contributed at least 2 Atlanteans to the Atlantean Navy this turn receives a courage token. Ancient Atlas, choose a section, mountains, hills, or forests. All target numbers in that section are reduced by 1. A lot of this doesn't make sense now, but this is all very helpful stuff that can help you win the game easier and get more resources and be really, really helpful. Now, each of these segments of the island also has some little circular indentation here, which indicates how many workers can actually occupy that segment. So at the very bottom, only 1 person can go there, but as you go closer to the top, it goes to 2 and then eventually 3. Now, you can put multiple of your own workers there if you want more of a shot of getting whatever you're trying to get, whatever resource or cards or whatever, but you might be taking spots that other players may want to take as well, so you have to really determine who wants to get what resources and how you want to disperse them. But that's the card playing one right there, or taking the knowledge, the different knowledge cards. 3 of the other segments are all about getting resources. So you have crystal, gold, and the unrefined ore. And they're mostly the same, although it's a little bit easier to get the gold and the ore as opposed to the crystals. But when you put a meeple out there, or your worker, and you get to the production phase in turn order, then you're just going to roll the die and hope to either meet or beat the number that is on that segment of the island, hoping that you get a resource. So if I was to get a 4, 5, or 6 on the very bottom rung of this segment here, I would be able to get a crystal. If I fail, I fail. If my worker goes back, I get nothing. And even though it's safer as it goes in and there's more spots, it's more difficult. So all the way up at the top, right next to the core of the island, you need a 6 or better, well, only a 6 unless you have some kind of bonus, in order to get a crystal. So there's more spots, it's safer, but it's tougher to get those resources. Over here in the forges is where you can actually, as I mentioned earlier, refine the ore that you've gained, the black cubes, into the light gray Atlantium cubes. And all of this, by the way, is just going to be needed for these different parts of the machine, which all need these different types of resources. But we'll get back to that in a second. So if you put up at the top here, if you're able to put a worker there, you just refine 1 ore into 1 Atlantium, an even trade. And that's kind of how it stays for the first 3 top segments. But then if you get closer to the bottom, it's 1 ore gets refined into 2 Atlantium, and at the very edge, 1 ore gets refined into 3 Atlantium, but it can be dangerous. And the final leg of the island is all about getting more workers. If you put 1 worker down here at the bottom section, you get a worker from your own personal supply. So if you're the blue player, you get your 4th meeple the first time. But it gets more expensive and less efficient to get a worker as you go up. So it takes 2 workers to get 1 here, 2 workers to get 1 here, 3 workers to get 1. At the very top, it's also 3 workers to get 1. That's the only section of the island where people can't mix and match their meeple. So if one player wants to get a meeple, they have to put all 3 of their own workers on one of these segments, or 2 of their workers, or 1 of those workers. Now, aside from the different resource locations and the library location or the worker location, there's also 2 other places you can put your workers. One of them is on the center of the island. Anyone that puts a worker on the center of the island and the game isn't over yet is going to be able to take a mystic energy. Mystic energy is going to be used for a variety of different beneficial purposes. One of them is that you get to add a 1 to one of your resource rolls. So if you really need to get a resource and you come up 1 short, you can spend a mystic energy to add another 1. And you can do this multiple times if you want. You can also transmute a resource. So you can spend 2 mystic energy to make 1 resource into another resource. You can cancel a flood misfortune. So if a part of the island that you really do not want to flood is about to flood from drawing from the flood deck, then you can spend 3 mystic energy to cancel it out. And players can combine their mystic energy on this if one player doesn't have enough to cover it. or you can unflip a flooded tile. So if a tile is flipped over, everyone together can communally spend their energy, in this case 5, to unflip it, which might be necessary as the game progresses and more tiles become flooded. The other place you can put your workers is over here on the Athenian board to fight off the Athenians, because at the end of the rounds, the Athenians are going to attack, and it's going to get progressively harder as the game continues. The Athenians are going to keep getting a bonus to attacking, and if they win, you're going to have to roll this die, add this to wherever they are on the Athenian track, so +1, +2, +3, +5, +8, +12, add it to whatever is on this 6-sided die, which actually only has a 2, 2 3s, 2 4s, and a 5. That added together, if that is more than the amount of workers that the players have put on this board, the difference is taken off of flooded islands. Or to put it another way, that many islands are going to flood, whatever the difference is. So it can be very, very bad to lose the Athenian board here. Now, some of the different things that that you can do during the game are going to get you courage tokens. And courage tokens will do a couple of things. If you place a worker down together with a courage token on one of the different production legs of the board here, even if that tile flips over from the flood, instead of just automatically losing your worker, you get to right there, then and there, take the production action where you are, then you lose the courage token and your worker goes back to your supply. So the tile is still flooded, but at least you get to take the action of that board with your meeple. The other thing you can do is if you put a worker here on the Athenian board with a courage token, that worker counts as 2 workers when fighting the Athenians, so that could be very helpful. Then each player is going to, I'm kind of bebopping around to the different parts of the game, but basically at some point you're going to be able to build parts. Each player will have an opportunity to build a part of the machine that's going to save Atlantis. Here's the different resources that you need over on this side of the card, and then it'll give you a special effect that's going to give something very beneficial as soon as you build a card, in addition to putting you one step closer to victory. So for instance, the Cosmic Codex lets you draw 3 knowledge cards and distribute them amongst all players however you decide. If you built the light drive, you get to unflip a flooded tile. If you built the entropy drive, you get to roll a die and something might happen. You usually get a resource or a mystic energy or perhaps nothing. The stellar rudder is going to let you draw 3 knowledge cards and keep 1. The actuality shield, move the Athenian galley back 1 step on the attack track, which will give them less of a bonus, hopefully. So that's basically it. There's other cards that will give you mystic energy tokens, which are going to let you protect the tile. If it gets flooded, you just remove the mystic energy token instead. I already explained some of the different knowledge cards. That's basically the game. Now I'll go back and explain how some of the characters have special abilities. So the Scholar, whenever you draw 1 or more knowledge cards, you may either draw 1 additional card or keep 1 additional card. The Explorer, all target numbers to collect resources are reduced by 1 for you. The Champion, you gain 1 courage token at the start of each turn, which makes them really good for fighting the Athenians. The Artificer, whenever you build a component, choose one of these 2 benefits. Pay 1 less resource to build that component, or receive the component's benefit in additional time. The Priest, you gain 1 mystic energy at the start of each turn. And the Astrologer, you may choose to place your Atlanteans at the end of the misfortune phase, which basically means that you can place your guys after you see how many tiles get flooded. And that's the game. The game is going to keep proceeding. Tiles are going to get flooded very, very rapidly. It's going to look like all is lost, but if you can just build those different components in time and get all their special effects and keep the Athenians at bay, you might just have a shot at saving Atlantis. In terms of theme and components, I think that Atlantis Rising is a success. I mean, I really like the idea of you have this island that's slowly sinking, and you have to build all these different components of the machine, which can be variable in each game. Everyone's got their own special power that they're using to manipulate the game. That's all very cool. I like that a lot. Component-wise, I mean, while the board can be kind of a pain to put together, it does look really cool, and as the different parts of the board flip over, that seems very cool, very integrated into the theme of the game. I mean, the artwork on the cards and such, like the character cards, I don't know, the characters actually kind of look like Saturday morning cartoon rejects, in the United States anyways, and there's not really a lot of art to speak of on the Flood cards and the Scholar cards, things like the Knowledge cards. But even so, all the components are of good quality. They use meeples, but, you know, I kind of understand that. You save money, and it's supposed to be a game that's known for having Eurogame mechanics blended into it, so I understand using meeples for sure. So, can't complain about the theme or the components. The gameplay itself. Now, I do, like I said, I enjoy the fact that it's trying something new and different with the Eurogame mechanics integrated in, where you've got these workers and you put them out, and the kind of push your luck aspect of if you put your workers closer to the bottom, it's easier to get whatever you're trying to do, or you get more of what you're trying to do, whether it takes you less workers to get a new worker, whether you're getting more cards, or whether it's just easier to roll and gain the resources. And I do like that you have those different options of what you can do around the board, but it really just comes down to such a random die roll. There are turns where you just don't feel like you're accomplishing anything because you roll, you just have a bad roll, and boom, you don't get resources, and that was what you did for the turn. I mean, you have different workers that you put out, so you have different options, but especially in the early stages of the game when you don't have a lot of workers, you can have some turns where it literally feels like you just didn't do anything. And you do have special powers to mitigate that, but nothing that really drastically alters the game. And what really bothers me is just that it feels like work. The whole game just feels kind of tedious. While you have this awesome theme, and the island is flooding, which should be very, very exciting, it just kind of feels dull and like you're going through the motions. And the whole Athenian fleet thing, that really bothers me. That's one of my huge knocks against the game, because you have to worry about the Athenian fleet. They're going to constantly be attacking you every turn and making you, every round, and making more and more of the island sink if you try to ignore them. So you can't ignore them, but at the same time, what this means is that essentially at least one player is going to be locked down with most of his actions trying to take care of the Athenian fleet. And it's usually the warrior class if they're in your particular game because of the courage tokens that they can generate. And that makes it no fun for whoever is stuck worrying about the Athenian fleet. It's not fun, it's not interesting, it's just something that you have to do, like an obligation. And that kind of sucks. I wish there was more options for what you could do to handle the fleet, or just make some other kind of new mechanic other than that. Like make them into crises cards that are just mixed into the flood deck. I don't know, but I don't like that at all, and man, it's tough to say. Like I said, I love the theme, I love the components. I just feel like they're kind of wasted on what's essentially a very tedious game. And I think this is why you saw this one kind of fade. I think it's out of print right now, because there was such promise there, and it just didn't deliver. It's just not a very exciting game. And maybe that's because you shouldn't mix these two elements, Ameritrashy themed cooperative games with Eurogame mechanics. I don't know. Other games have managed to pull this off. Robinson Crusoe is the first one that pops into my mind, where you have that sort of worker placement Euro mechanic idea, but the game is telling a very exciting, visceral story that, you're never sure what's going to happen each time. And yeah, there's a lot of randomness. And like I said, I hate some of the random die rolls in Atlantis Rising, but in Robinson, it just never seems to bother me as much. It never feels like a chore. The game can go on very long, but you feel like you're always involved and excited and doing things. And I feel like Atlantis Rising just never managed to make this into an exciting story. Whereas it's got a good theme, but it doesn't really tell a story, if that makes sense. Just not one. I mean, if you really love cooperative games and you're looking for something refreshing and something new and unique to try, if you have the opportunity to try this one, maybe you should. I can see where some people might like the sort of methodical puzzliness of some of the aspects of this, but definitely try it before you buy it, especially since it's out of print and can kind of go for a lot of money now, because I don't think this is going to be a lot of people's cup of tea. You have a lot of better options for cooperative games, even puzzly cooperative games. I mean, try Legends of Andor even. Kind of gives you the same feeling and much more exciting and tells a better story. So, can't recommend this one. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.